Hello everyone, it's time to begin class number 1 for the Pentateuch, part number 1. Let me get set up here on Facebook in case any of you have any questions or comments. Give me just a second. All right. I am not technologically advanced, friends. I'm still learning. So just bear with me here. Get everything set up to make sure we don't have to worry about these things as we are talking this afternoon. All right. Hello, Ty. Brother Russ, good to see you, my friend. This is Pentateuch part number 1. We are so grateful to see everyone. Again, my name is Brock Kendall. I know some of you and some of you I do not know. To get to know you better, my email address is on the syllabus, so please review that syllabus and you can contact me anytime through email or you can contact me through my phone number. I put my personal number there. It's already out anyway, so I don't mind you having it. And I certainly don't mind you calling me at any time if you have any questions. We're in this together. And so we appreciate you for wanting to study the Bible and have a desire to delve in and to search the Scriptures with us. And so we are just grateful for that. So we always want to take the opportunity to answer your questions or respond to your comments. Friends, today what we're going to do by way of introduction is we're going to introduce the class. We will introduce the class by going over the syllabus. Obviously, the syllabus was emailed to you. You should have the syllabus. If not, you can go to the website, BibleWayMedia.org, then go to the Bible Way Classroom there, and then you can go to my class, Pentateuch Part 1, and you can find the syllabus there if you do not have it already. If you do have it, please get that out. If you've printed it off, please get it out in front of you. If not, if it's digital, go ahead and look at it on your computer. What we're going to do is talk about the syllabus today. And listen, friends, if you have any questions, if there are any comments about this syllabus, please let me know. Okay? All right. Go ahead and look at the purpose. It's point number 1 here, the purpose of this class. Obviously, this is a 2-part class. And there's a reason for that. The Pentateuch, friends, is 187 chapters. We're talking about Genesis through Deuteronomy. 5 books, 5 humongous books. We will not be able to cover in class verse after verse after verse. This will be an overview of each book. All right, a general overview of each book. This semester, the fall semester, we will be overviewing the books of Genesis and the books of Exodus. Books of Genesis and Exodus. Next semester, which will be the spring semester, we will study the books of Leviticus through Deuteronomy. Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. All right, we will have a general overview of those books as well. Okay? If you look at point number B, letter B there, it says the Pentateuch. Maybe some of you are not familiar with the term Pentateuch. Well, the Jews would have been. The Pentateuch simply means 5 books. You have Penta, which means 5, and Tuch, which means books. 5 books. Hence, you have the first 5 books of the Bible. Also known to the Jews, if you were a Jew during that time reading the scrolls, you would know it as the Torah. All right, maybe you've heard of the Torah. You have the Pentateuch. It could also be called the Torah. And the Torah simply means instruction or teaching. All right, so you have the first 5 books of the Bible. That's what you think of when you think about the Pentateuch. All right, now, friends, the first 5 books of the Bible forms the introduction of God's revealed plan for man's redemption. Now notice what I just said. It's the introduction of God's revealed plan for man's redemption. It's not the beginning of God's plan, because God is an eternal being. He's always been there. God is self-existent. He has never been created. He's an eternal, divine entity. However, the beginning of His plan is revealed to us in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, which we'll get there later on when we get into the text. But we have the foundation of the Bible. When you study the book of Genesis especially. If you don't understand the book of Genesis, it's going to be hard for you to understand the rest of the Bible. Okay? We have in the book of Genesis the beginning of everything as we know it. The book of Genesis, chapters 1 and 2, lays forth or sets forth the foundation of the universe. All right? We understand when we read Genesis chapter 1 and 2 why the worlds were created. Why the world is created. The cosmos, the universe. The beginning of the universe is laid out in the Bible, Genesis 1 and 2. We also have the beginning of the animal kingdom, the beginning of the vegetation kingdom, and the mineral kingdoms. We have the beginning of the human family. We have the beginning of sin. All laid out for us in the book of Genesis. We also have the beginning of the condemnation for sin, the sin problem. Friends, the man's greatest need is for him to be redeemed. That is, brought back to God. Well, what separated man from God? Sin. Well, we understand, when we will understand more in depth, in detail, when we study the book of Genesis, specifically chapter 3, about the sin problem. Why sin is in the world, how did sin come into the world, and what can I do about my sin? All right? So we must understand the book of Genesis if we want to understand the origin and the nature of sin. All right? Okay? We will also study the development of God's plan that He developed beginning in Israel. All right? Now, something that must be understood is God's divine purpose was the Christ. Was Jesus the Christ. All right? He has purposed all things in His Son Jesus. All right? The Christ is the purpose, one could say, for the entire Bible. The prophets of old, Moses writing the Pentateuch, constantly points to the Christ. It's on your syllabus under the importance of this class. You see that? Under the importance of this class. John chapter 5, verse 46. It should sum it up for us all. Look at that passage. It's on your syllabus. It says, "For if ye believed Moses." Now Moses wrote the book of Genesis, the book of Exodus, the book of Leviticus, and Numbers and Deuteronomy. "For if ye believed Moses, you would believe me, for he wrote of me." Now that's Jesus speaking to His Jewish kinsmen. All right? And Jesus tells those Jews, if you believed Moses when he wrote thousands of years before I came to this earth, you would believe me. Why? Moses spoke of me. All right? The old law, the Pentateuch, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, pointed to Christ. All right? So you got to understand that. You understand the purpose of Christ. Notice letter B under the second point of the importance of this class. Letter number B. It says one must understand the Pentateuch to appreciate and fully understand God's eternal purpose for mankind, which He purposed in Jesus Christ. All right, I'm looking at some comments here. In just a minute. Have a few comments here. It says, Brother Ty, I'm having technical difficulties as anyone else. My video stops and shows like it's downloading. Is this with my computer? I don't know, brother. I don't know. Key forward, mine is fine. I don't know, brother. Maybe reboot your computer. Don't forget, Ty, if you are not able to get everything in this class, you can always go back and watch it. Anything that you miss, you can go back and watch it, okay? I'm sorry, brother. I wish I knew how to help you. You know, I'm not technologically advanced. Maybe we can figure this out at a later time, but you can go back and watch these classes. Sister Onstead, I'm sorry. I hope I pronounced your name right. I know you, but I struggle with names. It says you're having choppy pauses. Is anyone else having choppy pauses? Angela Holmes says mine too. I do not know. I do not know. I apologize for the difficulties. Obviously, when we are using computers, using technology in these classes, we're most likely going to have technical difficulties from time to time, okay? So please excuse that. However, if you're not able to get everything, please go back and watch these classes. Angela Holmes, it says, yes, I am. So you're still having technical difficulties, Mrs. Angela? Hello, Sister Samantha. Are you having difficulties as well? Yes. Well, Angela, I apologize. What's going on? Is it just choppy? Breaking out on you and so forth? Sandra, I'm good now. Ty, you with us, my friend? Exactly. Well, I apologize, Angela. Due to time restraint, we're going to have to continue, but please go back, okay, and make sure you watch this class at a later time if you can't get everything now. And listen, I'll work with you, especially because of technical difficulties. If you missed something or something was not clear, make sure you email me, call me, personally message me, and I can answer that question. Okay, wonderful, Angela. I apologize, Angela, so much. My phone number's down. If you want to text message me, you can if you're not clear on anything that we have discussed. I will tell all of the students, this is the introduction to the class really is extremely important. All right, we want to lay a foundation on why we're having this study, what this study will consist of, and why it's important. And we have discussed some of that thus far. All right. It says under textbooks and references. Textbooks and references. It says that which is permitted, only permitted, is the King James Version, the KJV, the New King James Version, or the American Standard Version Bibles. Now listen, it says those are the only ones permitted. Maybe I should have been clearer. These are not the only ones permitted. However, for you to follow along and to not get lost, these versions are going to be the best for you. I use the King James Version exclusively. I will be quoting from the King James Version. I will be reading from the New King James Version. And so it might help you, but the New King James Version is not very far from the King James, so that would be all right. The American Standard as well. Some of the translations that we have, our English translations, are very, they're paraphrased. Some of them are so modern that it's hard to even follow what if one is reading from one of the versions of antiquity, so keep that in mind. Books, articles, commentaries, they'll be recommended throughout this course. However, they're not required. I was just recently given all of your email addresses. I will make sure that anytime we have a handout, if I have an article that I want you to read just for your studies, if there's a commentary that I think would be good for you to have, I will email you the websites to order those commentaries. If I'm able, if there's no copyright stipulations, I can scan some of the articles, commentaries, and so forth and give them to you, okay? Might make it easier for you if I do that. But I'll make sure I at least give them to you 3, 4, 5 days in advance. All right? So I won't put too much pressure on you by giving them to you the day of or just the day before even. How are we doing? Is everybody with me? Are we still having technical difficulties? Angela, you still there? Ty, you still there? Ty, you're back? Are you back? All right. Course requirements. Course requirements. Notice it says each student will be required to write one paragraph covering the material discussed in class and will be due before the start of the next class period. The paragraph must be at least 6 lines. Each student will be required to read the assigned chapters. Okay, so each time we have a class, what you're going to want to do is write a 6-line at least 6 lines of a paragraph and have that due by the next class. You will turn them into me through my email. All right, my email address is on the second page of the syllabus, brockbwmc@gmail.com. All right, so make sure you email me your paragraphs before the start of the next class. All right. Notice it says each student will be required to read the assigned chapters. Now listen, I'm not going to be your judge on the judgment day. So what I want you to consider is having a motivation to study to show yourself approved unto God. All right, a workman needeth not to be ashamed, 2 Timothy 2:15. I want you to study the Scriptures daily, search the Scriptures daily, read the Bible daily, so you can have a relationship with God through Christ, not necessarily so you can be acceptable to Brock or just to pass a class. That's good, but don't miss the purpose of Bible study, all right? We don't want to just study for academic purposes, right? We want to study so we can understand God's will for man and so that we can have a relationship with God through Christ, so ultimately we can be in heaven someday. So that's why you want to study. So to get the most out of this class, you want to make sure you read the assigned chapters that are given. Read those assigned chapters. So you don't want to wait the day of, especially if you work a secular job. If you have children, you are busy through the daytime, and you know that you're not going to have a lot of time the day of to read. Set some time days before the class to read these chapters. Go over these chapters in your head and so forth. You'll really be on track in these classes if you read ahead. Under course requirements, letter B, it says there will be memory work prescribed each class period. At least 3 verses will be assigned. I received one email today of someone's memory work, and I appreciate her very much for doing that. Make sure by the start of next class, you see on your syllabus, the second page of the syllabus here, it gives you the memory verse for that class, for that lesson. Lesson 1 today, Genesis 1:26 through 27, Genesis 2:24. Maybe I should have clarified this, and I'm still learning how to do online classes just as you are, but today, Genesis chapter 1:26 through 27, and Genesis chapter 2:24 were due. If you did not memorize these scriptures, these 3 scriptures for today, please turn them in for next time, or turn them in to me through email as quickly as possible. Because by next class, Lesson 2's memory work will be due. All right? Lesson 2's memory work. So make sure you keep that in mind. All right. Remember, if there's any questions, comments, if you're able, please comment. Angela Holmes, I'm here still, reading up occasionally. You mean reading up through the verses of the Bible, or reading up on the syllabus as we're talking? But I appreciate you reading up. Either way. All right. Let's see here. Have here a message for class. Let's see if All right. Okay, look under test and grading. Test and grading. Oh, meant breaking up, Angela Holmes. That's all right. No apologies needed. It says test and grading. There will be 2 tests. There will be a midterm and a final exam. All right. Tests will be emailed out and are due back before the start of the next class. So you have 1 week to do each test that will be given to you. Your final grade will be based on your paragraphs, memory work, and your midterm exam. All right? Paragraphs, memory work, and your midterm exams. Now, as far as the memory work is concerned, all right, it is memory work. That means you memorize your scriptures if you don't want to cheat yourself. There is an honest system implemented in all of this. Obviously, you will not be reciting. You will not be reciting your verses. That's hard to do because we're doing this digitally. However, write your verses out on paper, or you can type your verses out and then email them to me. But do not look at the Bible while you are memorizing those. Hence, it wouldn't be memorization if you looked at the Bible. So don't cheat yourself, and I will be asking you if you memorized the scriptures. If you didn't, and you said you did, well, we know that would be lying. And Revelation 21:8, liars have their place in the lake of fire, which is hell, the second death. So please, do not cheat yourself in memorizing the scriptures. Do the best you can to memorize those scriptures. Don't just write them out. All right? Course schedule. This class will meet each week at 4 o'clock. The syllabus says 4:30. I apologize for that. Each Thursday. Each class will be 50 minutes in length. Remember, if you cannot watch the class live, which I would say most of you will not be able to watch the class live, make sure you watch it before the next class. All right? Do not watch the next class, which will be next Thursday, without watching the first class, this class, before you watch the second class. You will be behind. You will most likely be lost, and you don't want that. You don't want that to be. You want to get the most out of this as you can. All right. Second page of the syllabus. You see the lesson plan as set out there. Look at the bottom. There's 3 stars there, and there's a paragraph there. It says the Pentateuch, first 5 books of the Bible, consist of 187 chapters. All right? Hence, there will be much reading outside of the 50 minutes of class each week. For the student of God's Word to get the most out of this class and to not cheat themselves of God's knowledge, one must read. This is the most important thing that you can do to stay ahead in this class. That is, read the chapters. So, next week, we're going to study Genesis chapters 1 all the way through 11. All right? It says on the syllabus, lesson 1, chapters 1 and 2. We're not going to be able to get to that today because we need to introduce this class. I want all of us to be on the same page. So we'll be studying Genesis 1 through 11 next week. Read those chapters. You can set aside some time each day. Read a chapter, 2 chapters, 3 chapters. Don't put pressure on yourself and stress on yourself to read all 11 chapters on the day of the class. Number 1, you'll be stressed out. Number 2, you won't get the most out of the reading. You will skim it over. You'll read it too fast. You'll miss something. And you don't want to do that. All right? So, make sure you read. Make sure you read to stay ahead. I will email you your memory work. And we discussed that already. Are there any questions, any comments to the syllabus? About the syllabus, in regard to the syllabus? What to expect in this class, what not to expect? Any questions about the assignments? Anything of that nature? We have Angela, Sister Sister Anik, Sister Holmes. Sister Onstead. All right. Thank you all for being here. Okay, since we discussed the syllabus, let's introduce the book of Genesis, the first book in the Pentateuch. That is the first 5 books of the Bible, which is the law of Moses. I like it to be understood as the law of God as written by Moses. Let's discuss, by way of introduction, the book of Genesis. All right? Book of Genesis. Friends, it's the first book of the Pentateuch. The book of Genesis simply means beginning. Beginning. It comes from a Hebrew word, bereshith, which simply means in the beginning. If you were a Jew back in the time of Moses, you would see the term bereshith, which would mean in the beginning. The book of Genesis sets forth the beginning of all things as we know it. All right? As I said before, we study about the beginning of the universe. Without the book of Genesis, how would you know how the world came to be? You'd go outside, you would look at the beautiful creation. Yes, you would understand that, hey, the creation's beautiful. There's great organization. There's great design. But how did this happen? Did it happen by happen chance? Did it just simultaneously, for no specific reason, just pop up? No. The book of Genesis tells us that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Genesis chapter 1 and verse 1. We know that God spoke this world into existence. The book of Genesis tells us that. All right? We have the beginning of the animal, vegetable, and the mineral kingdoms. We have the beginning of the human family. All right? If you remember, one of your memory verses for this week is Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 through 27. All right? Genesis chapter 1, 26 through 27 says, "And God said, Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let him have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." Now, what's that verse tell you? Genesis 1, 26 and 27. It tells us that man is created in God's image. All right? As distinct from the animals and the rest of the creation. The purpose of the creation, all right, one of the purposes for the creation is for mankind. All right? For the human family. That which was created in God's image. Now, are we talking about from a physical standpoint? No, we are created in the image of God from a spiritual standpoint. God is a spirit. They that worship Him must worship Him in spirit and truth, John chapter 4, 24. But God is a spirit. He's a spiritual being. We, the human family, are spiritual beings. God created man with an intellect. God created man with the comprehension to understand certain things. He didn't create the animals like that. He breathed into man the breath of life. He breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And man became a living soul. Not the animals. The animals don't have souls. But man was created in God's image. Man has a soul. Therefore, we are created to worship. To know who we are worshiping. We base our worship on an understanding of the one who we are worshiping, or who He is, or what He is, or what it is. Well, we understand, as those who are trying to follow God, that God is worthy of our worship because of who He is. We also have the beginning of sin in the book of Genesis. Remember, what's the book of Genesis mean? What's the word Genesis mean? It means beginning. Beginning of all things as we know it. The universe, animal, vegetable, mineral kingdoms, the human family, and sin. Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 through 6 tells us how sin came into the world. We have the account of Adam and Eve in Genesis chapter 3, 1 through 6. And we have Eve eating of the forbidden fruit. All right? She made that choice to sin. Satan, the serpent, came and lied to her. She accepted that lie. She knew what God told her prior to what Satan said, but she chose to partake of the forbidden fruit. She missed the mark, which that's the definition of sin. She transgressed God's will, and because of that, she was separated from God. All right? Do you remember the consequence that she had to face? It was childbearing. For the man, it was working, toiling in the field. All right? And he now becomes a mortal individual. That is, he will die physically, but he doesn't have to die spiritually. We find the unfolding. We find the unfolding of the scheme of redemption. The unfolding of the scheme of redemption. That is, God unfolds the plan to bring man back to God. All right? Eve, Adam, we have the sin in the garden. Before the sin in the garden, we lived in a perfect, or man, Adam and Eve, the only two, lived in a perfect paradise. Perfect world. They were going to live forever with God. But because they disobeyed God, they did something that they were not supposed to do. After God told them what to do, they were separated from God. And the only way to be reconciled, brought back to God, is through Christ. All right? So we have the unfolding of the scheme of redemption, which we are all in need of redemption. We have the beginning of sacrifices, as laid out in the book of Genesis. We even have the beginning of the Hebrew nation, the beginning of the Jews. Right? From Genesis chapter 12, 1 through 3, we have the promise. Angela Holmes, would you say they was as perfect as God before sin? I wouldn't say to the extent of God, because God is incapable of sin. Man was capable of sin, but they were perfect in the sense that they were going to live forever like God on the earth. They were never going to have to die, physically or spiritually. The only reason, all right, that they had to pay the price, she had to bear the child, the man had to work, was because of a transgression of God's will. I'll refer you, Mrs. Angela, to 2 John 9 through 11 would be a good passage of consideration. Whosoever transgresseth God's will, that is, goes beyond God's will, hath not the Father or the Son. Sin is what causes man to leave, by choice, fellowship with their Creator. And so you got to consider that. If it were not Adam and Eve to sin, it would have been someone else. The reason why I say that is God had in His mind the cross. All right? God had in His mind the cross when He created the universe. He was going to send forth Christ. That was a promise that He made. He purposed all things in Christ. That had to happen. All right? And God's not a liar. Does that answer your question? What did you have in mind, Angela? Maybe you had another thought there that you might want to clarify even more, but I think I understand your question. Who is the author of the Pentateuch? Who's the author of the first 5 books of Moses? Well, friends, first of all, it's not a salvational issue. You don't have to know who wrote the first 5 books of Moses to go to heaven. But listen, the Bible explicitly states who wrote it. If you look at Exodus chapter 17, verse 14, which is the second book in the Pentateuch, all right, Moses wrote the book of Exodus. We find there in Exodus chapter 17, verse 14, that Moses was told to write these things in a book for a memorial. That tells me that Moses wrote the Pentateuch. But not only that, go over to Matthew chapter 19, 7 through 8, and you will see that Jesus Himself stated that Moses wrote the Pentateuch. All right? That takes care of it for me, right? And as we stated on your syllabus, John 5:46, it says, for if you believe Moses, you'd believe me, for he wrote of me. So Moses wrote of Jesus. All right? Now listen, next week we're going to open up our Bibles and we're going to start in the text. We're going to cover Genesis 1 through 11. So I beg of you, read those chapters. And we will overview each chapter. We will discuss the main points in chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. All right? What they mean for us and what they meant for them at that time. Angela Holmes. Angela Holmes says, my thought was before they ate of the forbidden fruits, they would be perfect without sin like God. But once they went against God's will, and their eyes was open, and sin entered their life, then they were no longer perfect as God originally made them. Very well said. I see where you're going with that statement that you made prior. Absolutely. Just because one is like someone doesn't mean they have all the same attributes. All right? No man is actually as powerful or as perfect to the extent that God is perfect. But they are complete. The biblical definition of perfect means complete. So yes, they were perfect in one sense, like God, and so that caused them to be able to live forever. But you're right. Remember, Adam was naked, and he knew it once he sinned. Angela, he knew that he was naked because he knew he sinned. He tried to hide himself. God said, "Where are you, Adam?" It's not that God didn't know where Adam was. Adam didn't know where he was, and God wanted Adam to recognize where Adam was. Adam transgressed. All right, Adam transgressed. He hearkened unto his wife Eve instead of hearkening to God. And Adam was ahead of his home. He failed to do that. And so sin came into the world. And because of sin, we have death, spiritually and physically. Now here's the thing. We are all going to die physically. Not a person can escape that. The Bible tells very specifically, very explicitly, as it is appointed unto man once to die, after this the judgment. However, not all have to die spiritually. And that's what we have to consider. I know I'm going to die. It's going to be someday, but I don't know when. But I know that I don't have to fear death because I can conquer death through Christ, just as Christ conquered death by raising from the dead the third day. You see, that's why we are saved by the resurrection of the dead, the gospel, the good news, death, burial, and resurrection. We got to be partakers of that. Good point, though, Angela. Very good point. If it wasn't Adam and Eve, it was going to be someone to come along and sin. But it was a perfect paradise before the sin. Adam and Eve was going to walk with God forever. All right, so thank you for that. Angela, I always appreciate these comments. They are so good. Anyone else? Ty, are you still with us? Say something, my friend, if you are. All right. I think we have 19 students in my class, and I'm seeing not that many. I'm seeing some, but not 19. So, but I understand we all can't watch during the actual class. Okay, that should take care of the syllabus and the book of Genesis, the meaning, how it's the beginning of certain things. Again, next week we're going to talk about Genesis 1 and 2, the creation. Genesis chapter 3, sin. Genesis 4, we have the murder, the first murder. Cain murdering Abel, the significance of that. Chapter 5, we have the genealogy, which we can trace our lineage through the genealogy in Genesis chapter 5. Genesis chapter 6 through 9, we have the account of Noah and the ark. But the focus of chapters 6 through 9 is not the ark, it's not the flood, but it's the faith that was exhibited through obedience by Noah, that saved him and his family from the flood by getting on the ark and by doing all that God commanded him. I want you to pay attention to verse 9 of Genesis 6. Noah was a perfect man in all his generation. In his generation, he was a perfect man. He walked with God. He was a righteous man. And so you got to consider that. He was righteous because he responded to the grace of God. While everyone else decided to ignore God and His commandments. All right. Genesis chapter 10 sets forth another genealogy because the whole earth was destroyed. The universe was destroyed because of the flood. And so after the flood, life kind of started all over. Noah came off the boat with Shem, Ham, and Japheth, his sons, and their wives, and Noah's wife. We don't know the wives' names of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, nor do we know the wife of Noah's name. However, we know that life began again with them. And God made a covenant with Noah. And the symbol of that covenant was the rainbow, if you remember. Genesis chapter 11, we have the beginning of languages. The beginning of languages. We call it the Table of Nations or the Tower of Babel. And then Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. That is going to be part of your memory work. Very important, friends, that you memorize chapter 12, 1 through 3 of Genesis. Very important. That is the beginning. God did not set forth His purpose in verse 15 of chapter 3, but He set forth His promise that He promised through Abraham and his seed, which would be Israel, specifically Christ. All right, there. And so that's very important to understand. The gospel or the New Testament writers refer back to Genesis chapter 12 often, frequently, to illustrate a point. You got to understand that. If you don't understand that, then you're not going to understand what the New Testament writers are saying, which is the law under which you and I live today. So we want to make sure that we understand that. Are there any? Let me ask you this before we close. We have about 7 minutes before the end of this class. Are there any questions about the test? Any questions about the grading system? Any questions about the course requirements? Anything of that nature? Again, I know some of you cannot watch live, so when you watch this class, email me your questions, and plenty of time for me to respond to those questions before the next class. I will check my email daily, at least once a day, but sometimes twice a day, morning and night. I will try to check them mid-morning and mid-evening as well. So feel free to email me your questions. If you want to get a hold of me on the spot, friends, what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to call. Maybe I should have thought that through, right? You're going to need to call me or send me a text message. This is interesting that we are able to have these classes online, but we're going to have some difficulty in our live streaming because of the difficulties that can arise when you have technology at hand. It's just sometimes inconvenient and it's just stressful. Angela Holmes, can we use notes for test? Yes, I don't mind you using the notes. Your test, Angela, I'm glad you mentioned that. The test will not be multiple choice. They will not be true or false. They will not be matching. All right? The test that I will give will be discussion questions. I will give you discussion questions for your test. There's a reason behind that. I want you to understand the thrust of the text. Okay? I don't want you just accumulate facts in your mind and then regurgitate those facts. All right? Anyone can do that. We're not studying the Bible on an academic level. We want to understand what do these passages that I'm studying mean for me? How do they apply to my life where I can live faithfully unto God? So that's how your questions will be. There will be discussion questions, and you might have for your midterm exam, 10 questions. I'll say write a paragraph for each question. You see, that will even out to a 30 or 40 question test that have to do with multiple choice and true and false. But I don't mind, Angela, you using your notes for the test. Absolutely not. There are, however, wrong and right answers. I won't just accept anything. The answers need to be from your notes in regard to what we discussed in class. Obviously, we don't want to make up anything, and I don't think you'll do that. I don't think any of you will do that. But you know, you all decided by choice to be a part of these classes. So you took on the responsibility. Obviously, I don't want you to be stressed. I don't want you to be overwhelmed. I'm going to work with you, and we're going to work together, and we're going to get the most out of God's Word that we can together. However, since you've taken on the responsibility to do these classes, I want you to understand. I want you to get the most out of them. The only way you can do that is if I put a little pressure on you to say, hey, make sure the answers that you give come from what we discussed in class. I hope that makes sense. You know, I can tell by some answers that are given, that will be given, if they are copied from a book, if they're plagiarized, which is using someone else's material without thinking it through, just copying what they put down, which is cheating yourself of the knowledge of God. And you don't want to do that. And so please, I ask of you, don't do that. Any other questions? We got 2 minutes. I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have. Angela Home, makes sense. I don't tend to make sense very often, but I'm glad I make sense concerning that. Anything else out there? Brother Ty, I don't even know if you're with us anymore. Are you? I'm going to assume that you're not, since you're not responding, because you like to talk, brother, and I'm surprised you're not mentioning anything. All right. Again, if you're not able to stream these classes live, make sure you stream this class before the next one. We appreciate everyone. Again, email me, call me, text message me. My number, my email address, all of my information is on the syllabus. So ask me any questions that you may have. I hope it didn't seem like we were everywhere this week. It may have seemed that way, but we had some difficulty, technically speaking, at the beginning of the class, which slowed us down a little bit. I'm trying to figure out how I can respond to your questions and comments and so forth. So until next time, study, read. We're going to study chapters 1 and 11 for next week. Do your memory verses. Do your paragraph. Email them to me. I will see you next week. Thank you, everybody.